deploy a cluster today on VMware of two file servers in a cluster using vVols. If I want to add a third node, that third node must be a VMware server. However, if I were to use iSCSI storage as an example, I could have 2 nodes in a cluster of VMware, and I could choose to add a third node, and this third node could be a physical node. Now I've got 2 nodes in the cluster and 1 node outside the cluster, and I could add a 4th node outside the cluster. And then I could evict the first node in the cluster and the second node in the cluster, and I could move my entire service from inside virtual machines back to physical hardware, or even to Hyper-V. I can move my infrastructure around without vVols. If I had vVols, I'm stuck and I'm always going to be running VMware. Same with storage space direct. If I've got 2 machines sharing raw hard drives, I've got the exact same problem. They have to be able to access them. So to fix that, and this is all about server consolidation. It's about taking the 30 file servers you have today and actually compressing them down into 3 or 4 nodes of a cluster. And in fact, what I recommend is starting with a 2-node cluster. As you grow, you can even start with a 2-node Hyper-V cluster or a 2-node VMware cluster. So you've got 2 VMs running in VMware. You cluster them together, they connect to the storage via iSCSI, and you run that 2-node cluster. When you get to the point that you need more memory or more processor than those VMware infrastructure can handle, you then kick them out to physical servers if you need to. But you can do that all live. And what we can do is, for server consolidation, the first thing is, how do you get your services onto that cluster in the first place? There's a feature built into Windows Admin Center called Storage Migration Services. If you get a chance to see this session, I think it's being put on by Ned Pyle this week. If you get a chance to see Storage Migration Services in Windows Admin Center, get a chance to see this. You can point Storage Migration Service, and you can tell it that the source is going to be this old Windows 2003 server or this old 2008 server. The destination will be this service on my cluster, and it will migrate that entire cluster over for you. And not only will it migrate the entire cluster storage for you, not only will it migrate the file services over for you, but it'll also migrate all the security accounts, all the local accounts. It'll even let you point to a Samba server as the source. So the idea here is you can actually do this with a very, very small amount of downtime. Now, there is some downtime involved, because if you're moving a terabyte of data, it may take you days to move all that data. It may take you a week to move all that data, but that data is being moved while the system is running. At the end of that process of migration, it'll migrate, and it'll restart the migration, do it again and again and again until it's very, very close to caught up. And then at a certain point, when you want to pull the trigger, you stop people from accessing the old share, you change your DNS record, you change your cluster to have that IP address, and then you do the flip over. And the flip over, the whole flip over process is handled by Storage Migration Service. It'll actually walk you through the entire process. Your outage window for even terabytes of storage could be 15 minutes or less, which is the amount of time it takes for your hosts to refresh their DNS records. So again, a very, very useful tool. Really can help you get off of old Samba, running 2.0. It can help you getting off of old 2003, because you know those are no longer supported. It's kind of dangerous to be running those nowadays. Also because of the security incidents. The other thing you can do is you can use vNICs defining your cluster, so that you can actually have your cluster belong to many VLANs. This way, if you've got file servers all over your infrastructure, one on this VLAN, one on this VLAN, one on this VLAN, one on this VLAN, you can actually make your service a member of those VLANs as well, and give them the dependent networks they need, so you don't have to go through gateways to get to them. So at that point, you can get a lot of value out of using vNICs. And again, this is what that process looks like. You can take any of these sources. And by the way, these percentage numbers here show you what percentage of file services out in the wild are these different operating systems. That's right, 18% of file services out in the wild are running 2003. 45 are running 2008 and 2008 R2. That's more than half are running outdated, obsolete operating systems. That's really where the migration needs to go. And again, the idea of being able to turn off all this old equipment relieves your headache as an IT guy. As an IT administrator, you'd not want to get a call at 3 in the morning for a machine running 2003 that hasn't been updated in 10 years. It's a bad call. I've had those calls myself. So again, running into a multi-node cluster, and again, you can actually take this multi-node cluster, start out with 2 nodes. Every time you run out of resources, you could add nodes. And again, you can do this as virtual or physical, but you can add nodes, and you can also evict nodes. And I'll go into that in a minute as well. So security is another thing you gotta be really careful of. With security, you never rely on a single method to protect yourself. So Microsoft, they've got you covered, right? They got snapshots. Life is great. well, it's great until you start getting malware. It's great until you start getting this. It's great until you start getting this. So there's a lot of things that will actually fail. You have to be able to watch out for the unknown threats. You have to be able to anticipate a lot of this stuff. Another feature that's a great product from Microsoft that you got to be able to watch is FSRM, File Services Resource Management. That tool will let you set audits, and will let you set honeypots, and will let you set automation in your file services so that you can watch for things like malware. You can actually look for things. You can put files in certain directories that you know are easy to search, easy to find, and if they're ever touched, you know that somebody, you can have the audit set up to tell you who touched it. You can actually detect malware and detect ransomware before it ever incorporates all of your data. And what happens if malware does get in there, and if ransomware does get in there and encrypts all of your data on your system? Well, you're kind of out of luck, right? Well, not if you actually rely on the second method, which is snapshots. If you have hardware-based snapshots that are outside of the control of the server itself, you now have a get-out-of-jail-free card. And the way to look at that is, all you have to do is be able to look at your snapshot and say, oh, this is where the snapshots start getting larger and larger very, very quickly. That's when the malware must have infected me. Let's roll to the snapshot right before that. And again, for an example, on Nimble Storage, we have 1,000 outstanding snapshots available per volume. So if you do a snapshot every hour, and then you retain one snapshot every day, and then you retain one snapshot every week, you could be going out years worth of data that you can store on these things. And because of the fact that the inline compression and inline deduplication, the space savings is actually there because you're not going to be storing double and triple and quadruple copies of the same thing. So the space savings actually lead you to want to do more snapshots, not less. And that can help you out of some really, really tight situations. Another thing to watch out for is SMB signing and SMB encryption. In your environment, you should not be running unsigned SMB anywhere. Do not allow it. You should have an IDS looking for unsigned SMB traffic. Because anytime there is unsigned SMB traffic, someone can get in and simulate you. They can get in between a host and a server, pretend they're the server, and all of a sudden intercept all of your commands and be able to pretend to be you. They can impersonate you to the server and do all kinds of bad things. Do not let SMB signing go away. And SMB encryption lets you prevent somebody from snooping traffic. Remember, signing doesn't prevent snooping, it just prevents impersonation. Encryption prevents snooping. So again, these are two features you definitely have to have. And again, SMB signing was required in 2.1. SMB encryption is required in SMB 3.0. This is an example of what the snapshots look like on a Nimble array as an example. You can actually say, I want to take a look at all of my individual volumes, and you can say, okay, for data protection, these are all my snapshots, and you can take them, every hour. And you can see how many megabytes each snapshot's used. So when I say that, you can look and say, oh, let's see how big these snapshots are and just roll through time. And I can also do this all through PowerShell too. So I can sort them and say, where do my snapshots grow? And I can actually graph them and figure out where the infection happened. So there's a lot of tools here that make life really easy for you. So immortality. Immortality is the ability so that those of you who have migrated a file server before that's been out of date, you ever had to come back to that file server 5 years later and do it again? Or a couple of years later and do it again, and do it again, and do it again? Those days should be over. If you do it properly, you'll do it once and you'll never do it again. And the reason for that is that once you build it into a Windows file server cluster, you don't have to use Storage Migrator to get it into the cluster. Once it's in the cluster, you can now use Cluster-Aware Updater to keep your patches rolling. And if you've got a multi-node cluster, and by the way, for this, I recommend 3 nodes or more, because Cluster-Aware Updater will automatically download all the service packs and patches from Microsoft. It will install them on one node after draining that node. Once it is back up and running, it'll install it on the second node after it drains that node. But the idea is that no 2 nodes are ever down at the same time. So your service never goes down. That's the important thing. We don't care about individual nodes. We care about the service. The service is gold and the nodes are cattle. So treat your nodes like cattle. And we want to make sure that the service never goes down. So the Cluster-Aware Updater will let you roll through the entire cluster update process without ever putting you at risk. More importantly, you can also use this to update the cluster itself, because Microsoft now supports what they call mixed OS clusters. So for migration, if you're going from 2016 to 2019, and you've got a 3-node Windows 2016 cluster, you can upgrade one node to 2019. Then as soon as it's up and running again, you upgrade the second node and reload the workload onto node 1. And you're doing this all live. So at no point do you have downtime, and you're actually rolling operating system as you're doing this. What's more important is because the service is golden and the nodes are cattle, you can take the servers offline as well. Let's say that you've got an old Gen 8 server from HP, which isn't going to be supported on Windows 2021 when it comes out, or whatever they happen to call it. That server may not be supported on 2021, but you can actually evict that node from the cluster without affecting the service, put a brand new Gen 11 server in there, or a Gen 10 server in there, join it to the node, and the configuration gets copied over, and you've now rebuilt that node without an outage to your service. The key is we should be treating file services just like that. That's a golden service that shouldn't go down. Think of it like an ATM machine. You should be able to run these like an ATM machine. So here's an example, evicting nodes, adding nodes. Who here has experience with Windows failover cluster? All right, who here has experience with Windows failover cluster before 2008? Because that's when it was ugly and hairy. Yeah. It's gotten a lot better. Windows failover cluster is much simpler to operate. They have a validator at the end to make sure everything is perfect. They've done a lot of work on making that thing clean and neat and manageable and usable. Evicting nodes, adding nodes, it's a real simple thing to do now. Everything can be done through GUI or through PowerShell. And again, clusterware updater will let you roll the updates around the cluster. So you don't have to bring the service down to be able to update your nodes. Now, site-to-site DR, that's another important thing, that you got a cluster on site A, now you want to be able to build something on site B, and you want to be able to copy your data there. Well, you can use Storage Migrator from Microsoft, or you can actually use the array-based site replication. And the array-based replication, again, we don't have any dog in the show, as it were. We don't mind whether you use one or the other. We want the solution to be the thing that works, not necessarily a certain piece of technology. So there are different advantages to each one. However, if you replicate the array, using the array, all the snapshots that go with that volume are also replicated automatically. So that gives you your get out of jail free card at your secondary site as well. So I'd recommend using array-based replication whenever possible, because you get all the benefits of the host side snapshots, plus you get the benefits of the array-based snapshots. And again, you can set these schedules up anytime you want. So for snapshots, I can say take a snapshot every day of the week between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And then also take one every week of the year on a Sunday for 52, and keep 1 year's worth. And this one I'm keeping 48 hours worth. So you can have all these conflicting schedules and have all these different snapshot protection templates. And each one has an option to automatically kick off the synchronization to the remote site as well. So you can say every time a snapshot like this happens, automatically replicate it too. So you can do synchronous or asynchronous on triggered levels. So that's the key. Never engineer yourself into a hole. Never make a choice about doing something like file services where you make a decision to go a certain way, like using vvols or using shared VHD, that prevents you from the flexibility of changing your mind later. Keep it open, keep it standard. Additionally, plan for rapid growth. Today, you might need a 2-node cluster because you're migrating 15 old file servers. And then once you've successfully done it, you're going to find there's a ghost IT infrastructure in your site. And all of a sudden, more file servers start popping up that you didn't know about, but now that people have seen you successfully migrate other file services, they're willing to let you see theirs. So you can get some of that ghost IT back into the regular IT infrastructure and be able to handle people properly. And additionally, you can take that rapid growth, and now instead of a 2-node cluster, you can go to a 3-node cluster, 4-node cluster, 6-node cluster, 18-node cluster, whatever node cluster you want. You can grow that organically. You could go to a 6-node cluster and then all of a sudden decide, you know what, I want to buy bigger servers. So all of a sudden, you buy the 7th node, making a really, really big server, and now you can kick out nodes 6 and 5 because they're no longer needed because that first server is much larger, and use that for other equipment. So you can do all kinds of things where you can jigger your equipment to handle the proper load. And patches and upgrades, always do patches. Never leave yourself unprotected. There are so many threats out there. There are so many, day zero bugs that you can fix by simply being on a constant patch schedule. The worst thing in the world is a server that's not being patched. It's the most dangerous thing in your environment. And that's something you should think about too. If you're going to be running third-party file services, if you're going to be running third-party file services, consider, is it something that they install and never patch? Is it running the same code that it was installed with 5 years ago? Or it's been constantly patched? So even if you are running third-party, that's fine, but make sure it gets patched. Make sure those security vulnerabilities are taken care of. In fact, there's a recent one that hit the news, I think 2 days ago, called, if you've ever heard of QNAP, that turns those into botnets. There was also one about 2 years ago for Synology that turned Synology file servers into botnets. So having a botnet pop up on your site's a dangerous thing.